You're listening to Pardon the Disruption with your host, Tom Young.
Hi, welcome to the show. This is Tom Young. Let's go around the room.
Hi, this is Bart Gallo.
This is TJ Young.
And this is Rohan Kapoor.
Great. Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, today we're going to talk about a topic of 5G. And people have probably heard about 5G. It's the next generation of wireless technology that's being talked about a lot in the press this past year. And anyway, we're gonna talk a little bit about it. One of the podcasts that we listen to as a group is the No Agenda Show with John Dvorak and Adam Curry. And it was interesting. John had talked about how he had worked for PC Magazine for over 30 years. And he wrote an article last summer around talking about the problem with 5G. And he basically got fired for it. And it was interesting, like, why would he get fired? All he did was point out the fact that there was some bad press last summer around some of the concerns of people have. Now, people have concerns of rolling technology all the time. They say it was the end of the world, a lot of the Luddite arguments. But there were some legitimate concerns about 5G deployments, and it was getting picked up in the press, and all John did was write about it. But it got him fired from PC Magazine. Pretty interesting. There's a lot of vested interest, apparently, in deploying 5G. So we're going to, break this down for people so they can think about it for themselves and look into it for themselves. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about 5G. Let's break it down a little. It stands for fifth generation.
Yep.
It's not some big scientific term. It's a marketing term.
Right. And it's being pushed out there right now as only a marketing term because there's some improvements being made to existing 4G technologies that are being pushed as 5G. And whether or not it's related to the technology or just desensitizing people
so like
to
4G stands for fourth generation.
Yeah.
So
the promise is faster speeds, lower latencies. They're saying that there's now in today's society with the amount of connected devices we have, and also going forward with the devices that are going to come on, we need something better than what we have now.
Right. It's going to be the end-all, be-all for IoT, autonomous cars, your toaster talking to your fridge, and a lot of these marketing buzz scenarios.
It feels like it's a hammer looking for a nail, though. I don't feel like a problem statement has been set up. So let me give it in contrast. When the Apple iPhone came out, it only worked on AT&T's 3G network, and data throughput was an issue. Like the early days of the smartphones, it was really hard to run certain applications because of the bandwidth and the latency. So there was a obvious problem statement. Today, I don't feel that there is a compelling problem statement to argue for the deployment of 5G. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem statement put out by the telcos is that we're not going to be able to deploy some of the new technologies like VR, IoT. We're not going to be able to deploy that on the existing network because the bandwidth that is currently there with 4G is not going to be sustainable. It's not going to allow the new technologies to come to fruition.
Right, and
that's pretty much the simple problem statement I think that they are trying to come out with.
There's an international competition element of it too, because the idea is that we're racing with companies in countries like China to be the best at deploying technologies like that and leveraging them to move into the next generation of a digital society.
FOMO.
But we're here based in central New Jersey, which has, it's the old telecommunications hub back for Verizon's headquarters is here.
Bell
Basking
Labs.
Ridge, Bell Labs was here. AT&T's headquarters was here back in the day. So we have pretty good coverage here, pretty good network speeds. We have a 1 gig speed here. And it's more of a little bit of a novelty because again, it goes back to the problem statement. What do you need a gig speed for? I mean, if you're streaming 4K video, I think you need 25 megabits.
Yeah.
So I got 4 or 5 TVs going with 4K streaming. I'm still in the hundreds, not the 200s, not even the 500s. So what do we need all this speed for? Now, in highly densely populated areas, like a sporting event or a concert, you may want that capability. So there is some situations where you want that, but it doesn't seem like it's a universal problem. I don't think bandwidth is not so much of our problem right now. So that's my personal opinion. I think in rural areas where they have coverage areas, that just becomes the business case for putting any kind of technology out there, whether it's 4G, 3G, 5G, it doesn't matter. They can't justify it because of the low traffic. That's a different issue than whether we should go to 5G. So let's talk about, Bart, you have some clips lined up. Let's show, there's a clip. This came out from CBS this morning, quintessential mainstream news.
Yep.
Came out in June of 2018. And this is what Dvorak wrote about. So Dvorak wrote his article in August and got himself fired. But he was just commenting on the fact that, hey, there's a lot of negative reporting happening. This is an example of CBS this morning just teeing up the issue and bringing up both sides of it and showing some of the negative aspects. So let's tee up this clip about 5G on CBS this morning from June of 2018.
Let's take a look.
Get ready for more ads like those. The wireless industry is in a race to roll out 5G service. Now, 5G is supposed to be up to 100 times faster than current data speeds. Could have used it on Amtrak yesterday. But it requires cell phone tower equipment to be closer to users than ever before. And that is causing outrage and alarm in some neighborhoods as antennas go up around the homes. Tony DeCopel is here with both sides of the conversation. Tony, lots of chatter about this. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. There's outrage, but there's also excitement. I mean, 100 times faster. But get this, wireless companies in the U.S. say they'll have to install about 300,000 new antennas for the rollout of 5G. That is roughly equal to the total number of cell phone towers built over the past 3 decades. The faster network could create new potential for work and play, but it's also leading to new concerns.
So that clip lays out what the basic issue is. This is a new technology, 5th generation, going to change the frequency spectrum, and therein lies the problem where I think we're going to get into some of the health issues. But they're going to go faster. They're going to come up with all the reasons why that's important for IoT. It could be gaming, the Google car. All those things are going to be coming out of the woodwork saying, yeah, we need this extra bandwidth. And I'm sure there's applications where you do need the extra bandwidth. But very interesting. You can see they're basically going to deploy billions and billions of dollars of capital. So all of a sudden now we can see there's a huge economic interest in this.
But it's kind of crazy because the economics don't even make sense for these companies. There's an economic interest because obviously the capital expenditure is needed because the frequency at which 5G is going to purportedly operate on is a much higher frequency, and the distance that therefore that frequency can travel is much less. So you need to invest the capital in the infrastructure to be able to even support, lengthening that to the point where it's actually going to be able to be used. The economics of that capital outlay don't even make sense for these companies, from what I can see. So
I think, at least not in the short term. I think they want to be the leader to deploy that capital so that eventually there's a return on the investment.
Right.
But they want to be the first there, even if it doesn't pay off in 1 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Some of the industry groups that I've gone to and talked to about this, they're even this is the proverbial problem of telecommunications around the last mile, which is they can get the network to the basically the main nodes working great, but then it's how do you get to that last mile? The last mile could be in the car, which requires being untethered, which argues for wireless, but even the last mile to the home. So firms like Verizon with Fios are putting fiber to the home and basically extending out the network, which is why they're able to get 1 gig speeds. But back in the day, they had DSL, which was digital subscriber loop, which was using the twisted pair and putting a digital signal on it, and you would get 1.5 megabits, which doesn't sound like a lot, but back in the day, that was much faster than dial-up speeds, which was using modems. So when you look at the history of trying to solve that last mile problem, we have this continual desire by the telecom companies to solve that last mile. And what 5G promises is to give a wireless last mile that's superior to wireline. Whether that's true or not is an engineering argument. But I think they're looking at it strictly from throughput and bandwidth and ignoring the health consequences, which is what I think one of the things we want to tee up that question is, at what point is it a legitimate concern to say, hey, I don't want to bathe in this amount of radiation?
Right.
Well, first of all, there's not many health studies on 5G, if at all.
There's no standard.
There's no standard. Well, there's no standard, and then no studies. And my question would be, have there been any studies on 4G or 3G in terms of its effect on public health?
Right. And it seems like the self-regulating nature of the telecommunications industry in the U.S. leads to a lot of new technologies and experimentation that are approved based on FCC figures and talking points, and less so on the health organizations' actual studies.
Yeah, there just isn't, and we're letting the people who have a vested interest in the outcome of the deployment of 5G tell us about whether it's good for us or not.
Right.
So, Bart, we have a second clip from that CBS this morning.
Yep.
Go to the 2:22 mark, and this is a quick explanation of what the 5G is doing and how is it different than the existing towers.
She says 5G uses high-frequency waves that support faster speeds, but don't travel as far as current wireless frequencies. So instead of relying on large cell phone towers spread far apart, they need small cell sites that are much closer together.
So therein lies the issue, and it's an engineering. So it's not just using the existing infrastructure per se, because of the power required. The higher the frequency, the less penetration it has through solid objects. Now you can compensate with higher power, but there's limits, right? And this is just.
And you said there's health concerns around the higher power as well when you get into that realm.
At the end of the day, it's the power and the time exposure. The combination of those two is what drives the impact of radiation on biology. Right.
So I'll ask a dumb question. How is this different than 5 gigahertz wireless signals for your Wi-Fi? I know that the new routers that come out now, they have the 2.4, which is your typical Wi-Fi connection.
Options.
And then you have the more powerful but also shorter range, same analogy there, 5 gigahertz signal for the wireless fidelity. Is that, I'm assuming that's not what we're talking about here, and it's not as powerful and therefore less dangerous. Do you guys know what is the difference?
So I think the 5G in terms of your Wi-Fi, the 5 gigahertz radio band that the signal operates on at home is different from the 5th generation cellular technology that we're talking about, which operates actually on a higher frequency. So I think if you wanted to do apples for apples, I actually think that the 5th generation cellular technology is operating at 30 gigahertz.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Versus 5 gigahertz, which is what your Wi-Fi at home operates. So it's a higher frequency.
I think there's going to be a branding concern in terms of what the public's perception of what this is, because everyone's getting used to seeing the, SSID 5G.
Exactly.
They're like, oh, this is much faster. Oh, we can have this everywhere. I'm for that, and not really understanding what this means.
Correct.
So
yeah.
There's the Bart has the stuff up on the screen. The 4G is using 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, and 5G will use some of that, but it also goes up to the millimeter wave, which is the 24 to 86. Now, it's interesting when you hit 90, I think, there's a military weapon for crowd control at 90 gigahertz, where they shoot a beam of electromagnetic radiation into a crowd, and when it hits your skin at the power that they shoot it at you, it feels like your skin's on fire. So there's a military weapon. I think it's just north of this spectrum where they've weaponized that frequency. So the real issue is it gets to the notion of we're constantly bathed in radiation. The issue has to do with time exposure and power. And because 5G is moving to a new frequency with a much higher power, I think it just requires a new conversation. And is this good? And I think too often we're relying on the people who have a vested interest in the economic outcome of deploying these things, and they don't necessarily care about the health risks.
Yeah, just if people want to go look at it, it's the active denial system. It's right on the Department of
What's
Defense
the frequency on the
website.
active denial? But just curious when you read through that. I think it's when I read it was about 90 gigahertz.
There needs to be better analogies for this stuff, because people won't really know what this
95.
means in terms of exposure, magnitude of exposure, and what that means. So I remember when the whole Fukushima disaster happened, there was issues around fish, what was being fished from the Pacific Ocean, and then that getting to the food supply for Americans, and people freaking out because they're seeing different isotopes in their food, and there's trace amounts. And then a study came out later on saying, yeah, that's bad, of course, but it's worse than zero. But if you fly in an airplane once in a year, you're getting more radiation during that one flight than eating all of that fish that you had previously gotten from Pacific Ocean. So yes, it's bad, but on what scale?
Yeah,
right.
So
are you meeting that standard in all aspects of your life?
And then you compound that with the money behind all these studies, and you know, obviously the telcos want this. So I think it's a battle, and the collateral damage is the public in terms of understanding this.
The study that says that smoking is good for you was funded by the tobacco industry.
Right.
Yeah.
So these studies, if you don't know who's paying for them, you don't know if you can rely on them or not.
So here's a question. Do you think we did, and it may initially seem unlinked, but I think it's linked. I want to know what you guys think. So we did a podcast episode on Fire Festival and what can happen when you give the chief marketing officer the decision rights, right?
Right. You don't have the proper segregation of duties in your organization.
And everything falls flat when you try and put this into practice. Do you think it's something similar is happening here, where the chief marketing officer effectively is driving the ship?
No, to me, it's the regulators, and at least in our country, feel compromised to me, and whether it be the pharmaceutical industry, where the FDA is a rotating door for pharmaceutical executives, or in this space where we're letting the FCC, that's largely controlled by the industry that regulates, talk about whether this is good for us from a health perspective. And, you have this cesspool of lobbyists who are pushing for parochial interests versus what's good for the society as a whole. And, Bart, you had an audio clip. Let's jump around a little bit.
Some of the health concerns.
Yeah, it's a good analogy for people to think of, because a couple things. People know that if they go get too many x-rays, it's not good for you. They also put sunscreen on when they go out in the sun. So they know that at some level, sun radiation is a part of life, and a little bit's okay, but too much is not okay. So let's play this quick clip.
Yep.
And that's okay, because I get it every 2 seconds. It's just a little bit of drop. No, what you really care about is how much are you actually giving me? How much, if I just had the drop in a beaker, does that beaker get full? Is that like a full glass of toxin? Or am I getting just a smidge? Which is it? Well, you only know if you consider the time element, okay?
Right.
Think about the sun. You walk outside naked in the sun. You're out there for half an hour, midday. You come back in, you got a little color. All right. Now let's talk about staking you in your backyard naked for 5 days. Now you have a very different experience.
So again, that clip makes it very clear what, just thinking about, we already know intuitively that too much radiation in the wrong format is not good for us.
Right.
And, the notion of power and time tied to certain frequencies. So the different frequencies will have different characteristics in terms of how it works, but then behind it, in terms of its efficacy, will be power and exposure. Exposure is a time measure. Power is how much is behind that wave.
Right. And I think it's illustrating that time element is left out of a lot of the figures that are used to justify the approval of, say, something like 5G being rolled out.
So it's interesting to see when we compare regulatory bodies, we look at the European regulatory bodies compared to the regulatory bodies here, and you can get a sense of how one body might be compromised relative to another body in terms of the different things that they look at. So if we say, so when you go into the airport in the U.S., they have these millimeter wave scanners that use, again, similar frequencies to the 5G, and they do a surface scan on your body. You've all seen the surface scans of where you have to raise your hands like you're a criminal, and they just do a quick zip around, and you get a low dose of this stuff. It won't penetrate body cavities. It's a surface scan. It goes through clothes, but not your skin. Now, I think that's banned in Europe. Like, you can't do these things. And what's interesting, the person who was pushing for those to be sold to the TSA, the lobbyist group was Michael Chertoff, who was the first TSA commissioner under Bush. So you see the corruption levels and the economic interest of the insiders trying to go sell this. Same with GMO. GMO foods, regulated by the FDA to a large extent, by industry. Monsanto has a lot of power here, but GMO foods are hard to sell in Europe, right? So you start to see this. So it's important for people just to be open to the possibility that the people who are supposed to be protecting us might not be.
Yeah, there's a great McKinsey recently did a study in February of this year, looking at the hype behind 5G, and I think the bad intent comes through in that survey. They surveyed 46 CTOs of telco companies that were directly involved in 5G development plans, and they asked them the question of basically, why are you doing it? And I think over half of those CTOs said it wasn't because we want to connect more devices, we don't want to make the experience better, we want to regain, or cement network leadership. And I think that sums it up perfectly in terms of the interests that are behind this. They're not doing it because it's a good thing to do. They're doing it because it's a good thing for them to do.
Not even for the capability, right? That's not even the main top reason.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Well, on that list, improving the overall health concerns. So to me, it's I have a mixed feeling about it. I mean, I want to see the continued progression of technologies in society, but not at the expense of public health.
Right.
And I don't feel like I can even get a straight answer. If you just do some Google searches yourself, you'll find all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
It almost seems like there's a catch-22 to get the right studies in place, because you need a large sample size and a large amount of time, to your point, to see the effects 5G will have in a large population.
Right.
So it's like, how can you have that before you roll it out? And then if you roll it out, is it too late? And then do you need to do it for 10 years for you to even find those effects? Because I would guess that it's a long-term effect. I can't imagine they're going to turn on these polls and people are going to start dropping dead.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Silicon Valley executives that don't allow their children to engage with the social media platforms, and I imagine a lot of these telco executives aren't going to want this on their front
lawn. If it
lawn.
comes out that the CEO of Verizon like won't allow it on his street, that's going to be
that
good.
Should be a regulation. If your company wants to roll this out, 30% of these have to be relatively close to your employees or something.
And I think it's worth asking the question as well: can 4G? Have we reached full potential in 4G? And
no,
right?
Just based on our ranking versus other countries, we were looking at that graph, right?
Yeah. What is it? Well,
we're 62nd in the world for 4G speeds.
Which is,
a lot of countries in South America and other parts of the world you wouldn't think have faster speeds.
It just goes back to what problem are we solving?
Exactly.
To the capacity issue, I think we were probably underestimating. I think we will fill the capacity with new services, new digital services and products and data flows if it's there. I think, when we were running on DSL for, you referenced before, over a decade ago, we were doing fine. We were living our lives. The economy was great. We're still a leading nation. As soon as there's a new capability, new capacity, new bandwidth, we fill that up, and immediately we're restricted again. So maybe if we're not restricted now, we will be soon. I mean, these phones, these iPhones, the battery gets better all the time. The performance gets better, and then eventually, you argue battery deterioration, but if we see capacity in terms of battery power or for performance, we will fill it up to its max, and then all of a sudden it's not good enough anymore.
I agree, TJ. I just think that the people at the front edge of the curve have the responsibility to articulate the problem statement and why we need it. I can tell you that, for example, I've unplugged TV for the most part. I stream just about everything. So I watch pay TV. I don't watch live TV. So I don't use a classical system. So I'm requiring high bandwidth internet to watch in 4G. So that's 25. But I'm only watching one screen at a time. So that's one person. But say you have a 5-person household to get the extreme. If everybody's watching 4K in their individual rooms, which is a different issue, right? That you're doing that, you're still only in the hundreds. And then you throw on email and security systems, you're up to 200. You're not at a gig speed. So I can't even articulate why you would need a gigabyte at the house or at a location. Now, I can say that if you're at a concert or at a sporting event where you have thousands of people in a single node, that you need a lot of stuff. But there are local temporal solutions that you can put in place for that to go do that. Now, maybe 5G is a thing you put at Giant Stadium or one of these large sporting venues, but you don't put it in every neighborhood.
I think the innovations come after. I think without the technical possibility, it's a waste of time to start ideating products that would have to rely on this kind of capacity.
Yeah.
So imagine OLED walls, all this technology around, like we're going to have every surface in a dwelling or a public space be something that's software definable, screens, streaming 4K. Where it's not feasible today because of cost, but second of all, we're going to be streaming 4K on every surface. Everything's definable. We can transfer data anywhere. And it kind of seems like sci-fi. But again, I feel like those crazy ideas come after in a way.
Yeah.
It's foundational to innovation such as that, standing up these new...
I'm also a paid shill, so
I can see that future where you have surfaces that are software defined and they are 4K streamed or some high version of that, and that would require a shit ton of bandwidth that we don't have today. But I also know how far away that is. That's not in 2020. It's not in 2021 or 2022. The capital investments that's being rolled out for 5G is a single-digit capital lifespan. Meaning that it's a 3 to 5 to 7 year investment. Now they're going to say, well, we can make some of the stuff last 15 years or maybe. We'll see. This stuff will have to be replaced when those OLED surfaces are everywhere in our house.
Is that the lifespan? I didn't know that. So it's single digit years, and then they did redo this again?
That's my assertion.
Oh, okay.
You mean okay.
Because
that's crazy.
Because this stuff is evolving so rapidly, you're not deploying 15 and 20-year capital in this space.
When you look at 3G to 4G to where we are now, even 2G, 3G, 4G, I think it's decades. Each one of them pretty much is on a 10-year cycle.
But what I'm saying is
that brings up a bigger issue.
They're doing capital refreshes within the generation of the technology.
But that brings up a bigger issue of capital refreshes in general that are the foundation of digital technologies.
Well, it's also at the heart of the economy.
If it's more granular, so they're saying we need to have more towers because the range is smaller. I mean, maintaining and updating fewer long-range towers is a lot easier to do and less expensive than maintaining many more thousands, 10x, 100x.
Yeah.
And we're going to need something like that in the future. I mean, maybe if it's too soon, or 50 years from now, if the hardware is making the hardware from 2 years ago obsolete, just the cost of doing that every couple of years, it's not feasible. Yeah. So how do you do that in a case where everything's obsolete immediately?
Yeah.
So I don't think this is a binary argument that it's we should do 5G or not do 5G. I just think the issue becomes, for me, that we have to introduce and have to be cognizant of the health concerns and not allow the people with a conflict of interest to tell us about it.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
And how do we ensure that our regulators are not corrupted, where they're influenced by, well, the tobacco industry said by this study that cigarettes are good for you. Now, eventually we got past that as a society, but there was a point in time where that stuff was going on, and it goes on today.
Absolutely.
You know, the food industry, the drug industry. So think about this. We know one of the top advertisers on network television is the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see any of those networks say anything bad about Merck.
The opioid epidemic.
It's just not going to happen.
Now, there's an interesting paradigm between the UK as well. We touched on it earlier.
Yeah. So
you don't see that in the UK.
It's only legal in 2 countries in the world. Australia and the U.S. are the only ones who can advertise for drugs the way we do.
Yeah, it's so, and that becomes a source of people's information, and it's basically just propaganda from the people who want you to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that it's all bad. These things might be great, and 5G may have some fantastic benefits from it.
Yeah.
But I just think that the purpose of this podcast is to open up the notion that we should start thinking about some of the health concerns and having a balanced approach to the adoption of these technologies.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys?
It's capitalism run amok. I mean, you're not going to stop this.
Yeah.
I think.
I already have 5G.
If these people are scared of being disrupted, Bart has 5G. Bart wants to be.
I don't know how it happened.
Because I think if it is this much of a differentiator, if they're not bullshitting, I think they have a fear of becoming completely disrupted, and so if Verizon does this and AT&T doesn't,
and China,
they could be blown off the map.
Oh.
And if you don't do this, you will lose your job if you're working for these companies.
Huge corporate prisoners dilemma.
You have to do it.
So
There's extreme anxiety.
We can. They're going to do this.
Yeah, they have to.
For sure.
So this is going to happen.
Right.
But the issue is, I think people are going to start. We just be a little aware that what's going on around you.
Yep.
Now, do you think that as a result of these things, that people are going to start to look for digital-free or radiation-free zones? Now, and the reason I say that is because I thought it was interesting. All of us, we were in the John Muir Woods a couple of weeks ago. When we visited the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. We went up to the John Muir Forest, the national monument there, and there was no cell phone service there. And there was a little bit of anxiety on my part, and I'm sure maybe you guys had some level where we're completely disconnected
From Uber. I think that was the anxiety.
Well, we couldn't get a ride. We totally lucked out getting out of there.
Analog cab.
Mine was the opposite. I felt actually.
You liked it?
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was going back to it.
Yeah.
But for that period of time, I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. No distractions.
So to me, I think maybe this is certainly something for a future discussion. But designing the home to be free of the radiation by wiring your home, having everything wired, where you can do that, and try to not at least get some of your time where you spend a lot of time at home and not be just bathed in this stuff, because we know that exposure and power are the two components to driving the health concerns.
Well, the whole issue is even if your home is wired, you're still going to be exposed to it on the block.
Yeah.
You're not exposed to it.
Right.
Then the last thing is, do you guys sleep with your phones?
Right on my face. It couldn't be closer to me at all times.
I actually duct tape mine as close to my heart as possible.
If I could put it in my brain, I would do it.
Yeah.
I'm too paranoid.
Yeah.
Last night I actually slept with my phone, and my iPad was next to me as well.
Yeah.
Whole Apple family.
So, again, we're a little off the beaten path here, but the notion of having your bedroom, just leave the stuff in a different room. Now, I use it as an alarm clock.
How dare you?
I need to wake up in the middle of the night, reach over and do a Google search on aliens and stuff like that. But at least keep it as far away from you as you possibly can, and up to and including trying a few nights, maybe on the weekend, where it's in a different room.
Yeah, I think the benefit there is not just potential health concerns with proximity to the technology, but just in terms of better sleep. If you only associate your room with sleeping and no other activity, you'll sleep better.
My iPad watches
I don't
me
take my
sleep,
own advice here at all. I never will.
My snoring app measures my sleep sounds. So anyway, this is a good topic. We could talk about this for a long time. I'm sure we'll come back to this.
Yeah.
We should revisit this later this year.
Yeah, we should.
Well, my encouragement just to people who listen to this and watch this episode is just be a little bit more, take control of what you think you know about this stuff, and just pay attention to this stuff. The people who are giving you the information largely have a vested interest in it, and just check the sources of your information.
Yeah, and be careful shopping for new phones that say they're 5G now, because they're not.
Yeah, I don't think it's out yet.
They're pushing them, saying 5G with one other vocabulary word after it. But
a lot of them are 5G on the 4G network.
Yeah, the true 5G phones are 2021, maybe 2020 at the closest.
So, all right, great. Any other parting comments? Great. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show today, Pardon the Disruption. If you enjoyed our discussion, I'd invite you to head over to our homepage at www.rumjog.com. You can go there and check out our perspectives page and hear more podcast episodes, read some articles. It's some pretty interesting stuff. You can get access also to our Digital Disruption series. This is a meetup that we do mostly in New York and New Jersey area, where we discuss the impact of these technologies on our society and the way we live and work. We do this alongside of industry experts in various fields like crowdsourcing, automation, and blockchain. The technologies that are disrupting our world today. Anyway, if you like that, you can also follow us on social media at Twitter on the handle @Rumjog. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.